How should you breathe during physical exercise? If you do a Google search of breathing during physical exercise, generally the instruction will say, well, you have to breathe through an open mouth because you're going to feel too much of an air hunger if you try and do physical exercise with your mouth closed. Okay, let's look at this. So runners, the vast majority of runners in the Western world will run with their mouth open. Why do runners breathe through an open mouth? It's not efficient. It's not increasing oxygen uptake. It's not increasing oxygen delivery to the cells. It's keeping the body in a more fight or flight response, and it's trauma to the airways. So I'm going to advocate nasal breathing during physical exercise. But when you first switch to nasal breathing during physical exercise, you're going to feel a stronger air hunger because the nose is a smaller entry. And as a result, because the nose is a smaller entry, there's a resistance to your breathing. The nose generally during the day, during wakefulness, creates a resistance that's about 2 to 3 times that of the mouth. So that resistance is going to slow down your breathing, and that resistance is going to restrict your breathing or reduce the amount of air that you're taking into your lungs. But that's a positive thing. If you continuously train with nasal breathing over a period of 10 to 12 weeks, amazing adaptations will happen that are conducive to improving fitness levels. So initially it's tougher. You feel an air hunger, and it's difficult because you're feeling that little bit more suffocated. But then your body makes adaptations. You don't need as much air for a given amount of physical exercise. In actual fact, one study showed that the gas change in the blood with mouth breathing was 40 millimeters of mercury pressure. This is carbon dioxide. And with nasal breathing, it was 44 millimeters of mercury pressure. In other words, when subjects trained for 6 months breathing in and out through their nose, after a 6-month period, the subjects then were investigated what were the gas in the blood, what's carbon dioxide when they were breathing through an open mouth versus carbon dioxide when they were breathing through their nose. And carbon dioxide when they were breathing through their nose was significantly higher. 44 millimeters of mercury pressure versus 40 is a big difference because the body is very sensitive to the accumulation of carbon dioxide. Now, if there's an increased carbon dioxide in the blood, carbon dioxide is not just a waste gas. People will often say, get in as much oxygen as you can and get rid of as much carbon dioxide as you can. But people don't realize that when oxygen passes from the lungs into the blood, and when it's carried by hemoglobin within the blood, it's carbon dioxide that's the catalyst for the red blood cells to release oxygen to the cells. This is called the Bohr Effect. This was discovered in 1904. So if you have a runner who is after, becoming accustomed to nasal breathing, over a period of time, they will have an improved CO2 level in the blood, improved partial pressure, and as CO2 is the catalyst for oxygen to be released, we can argue that more oxygen is getting delivered to the cells with nasal breathing versus mouth breathing. And it's not just about the oxygen that's getting delivered to the cells, it's also about the oxygen uptake in the blood. Because when you breathe through your nose, you're carrying the air deeper into the lungs, you're carrying nitric oxide into the lungs, and ventilation perfusion increases. In other words, the gas exchange improves when you breathe through your nose. Diaphragmatic breathing is also linked with nasal breathing, and your diaphragm breathing muscle is not just for respiration, but it's for stabilization, it's for posture, and it's for stabilization of the spine. So for motor control, for improved functional movement, for reduced risk of injury, it's very important that we are breathing using the main breathing muscle. So in a nutshell, why should runners breathe through an open mouth? If it's going to reduce oxygen uptake in the blood, if it's going to reduce oxygen delivery to the cells, if it's going to impair their functional movement, if it's not going to be efficient, because when you adapt to nasal breathing, again over a period of time, you can do a lot more exercise for a given amount of air, because there's an oxygen cost associated with breathing. If you're sitting there watching this, you're expending about 2 to 3% of your oxygen consumption just supporting your breathing muscles. If you go for moderate physical exercise, light jog for example, it's about 6%. If you do intense exercise, it's about 10% of your VO2. So if the oxygen you take into your body The energy cost associated with supporting the breathing muscles during intense physical exercise is 10%, and during maximum physical exercise it's between about 13 and 15%. Now, that's a lot of oxygen just going to support your breathing muscles. How if we make your breathing more efficient, that you don't need to be using, you don't need to be exercising, in other words, you don't need to be breathing so hard for a given intensity or duration of physical exercise. Or you could argue it the other way. You can achieve much more with the same amount of effort. So by changing and improving your breathing efficiency, and also when you breathe through your nose, you have to maintain diaphragmatic strength, because nasal breathing is adding an extra load onto the breathing muscles. And sometimes it's not as if we're taking one step back to go 2 steps forward. But I would say to any athlete or any person who is involved in sports performance, start devoting some of your training to breathing in and out through the nose. The benefits are amazing. It will improve your fitness levels, it will improve your recovery. It's also very helpful in terms of dealing with anxiety. If we're stuck in that pattern of fast upper chest breathing, we're more likely to be in fight or flight response. We're stuck in that sympathetic tone. So yeah, make the switch. It's a bit tougher at the start. Bear with it. Be persistent. Go at a pace that you can sustain nasal breathing. If the air hunger gets too much, just back off a little bit. And if your airways are very compromised, if you've an airway like mine and very small nostrils, it may help to get a nasal dilator. So a nasal dilator is a small product that you can buy over the internet. And you put it up into your nose and it basically expands your nostrils. So a nasal dilator is based on the Cottle maneuver. You put one finger here and one finger here, you gently prise your nostrils, and that will create more space that you can maintain nasal breathing during physical exercise. I would say to you, give it a go and see where it goes.